Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Art 196, Introduction to Designing Web Graphics, Fall 2021. Today's topic is an introduction to web design, is learning how to prepare graphics for the web. It covers a couple of different things. One of the file types that you'll need for web design. Second thing is the resolution that you'll need. And the third thing that I don't have up on my screen yet, but I will show you how to do, is the proper way to name your files. Now, this won't only pertain to the files that you'll use for your images, but for your HTML pages as well when you begin to work in Dreamweaver. So at the moment, I'm in Photoshop. If you don't have Photoshop, that's okay. You can use some other image editor. It doesn't matter to me, but I'm going to work in Photoshop. And since you should have access to Dreamweaver, which is an Adobe product, you should also have access to Photoshop as well. So I would download that and install it because you will need it to prepare your images. So, anyway, there are basically three different file types that you will use in web design. They are JPEGs. You can also, it doesn't matter whether it's JPG or, let's go ahead and change that so I can show you here. Sometimes it's also JPEG with an E in there, but it really doesn't matter which version you use. JPEGs are typically used for photographs. Okay. It's one of the most common file types that you'll see used on the web. One of the oldest file types that's still used from time to time is a GIF or GIF file, however you wish to pronounce it. I was told it was GIF like giraffe, but most people say GIF. And the third type is the most recent type, which was developed for web design, which is a ping.png. Now, when you're designing web pages and you're incorporating graphics, you don't need a high resolution image. You only need a small, low resolution image, and any more will not help you at all. So we will be working at 72 pixels per inch, and that's it. Okay, so the next thing that I'm going to do is show you how to name your files. So I'm going to go ahead and create another new file here. And it will be easiest if I just go ahead and for those of you who are new to Photoshop, I just hit Command N for new. And I'm using an 8.5 by 11 format, but you'll also notice that if you have web sizes, they will give you make templates available to you. And you'll also let you know whether you want a large screen format, a medium, or a web minimum size, okay? Well, I'm just gonna use the most common right now. We'll just go ahead and do that just for the heck of it. But for my demonstration today, it doesn't really matter what size you use. They've added in recent iterations of Photoshop these templates. They weren't available that long ago. They will give you a basic structure for your website. And this would be, I think, more pertinent to all of you for an advanced class, changing and designing web pages from Photoshop and then bring them into Dreamweaver. So I'm going to go ahead and create a brand new page here. You can see that it's a little bit different format than the letter size. But anyway, what I wanted to talk about was naming a page. So let's start with my text tool here. And I have Arial 72 point. And if I want to name my home page, and this is something that all of you will need to know, your home page will be it will be, don't name it home page, it will be index .html or HTM. It doesn't really matter, but be consistent when you're doing it. When you're naming your files, what you will need to do, let me go ahead and make this even bigger so all of you can see this. Highlight that and let's zoom in just a little bit more. Like so. Okay. So that for your HTML pages is the first one that loads is going to be index.html or .htm. For the images that you create, what you'll do is, for example, my first page, if that, or my first image. So if I were to type in here, my first image .jpeg, JPG, and let's go ahead and let's highlight all of this and let's make it a little bit smaller so we can see this. Okay. And I'll finish that and I'll move it over like so. This will not work this way. And there's a number of reasons that this file name will not work. So this is a big no-no. First off, you never start a file name with a capital letter. So don't do that. So I'll go back in here and I'll change that. So what you can do is go ahead and I'll start it with a small m. The second thing that's wrong with it is you never leave spaces between words. That's a no-no. So there's two options that you have for yourself. If you want to have a lengthy file name for your image, you can either use an underscore like so between this. So underscores are actual images or, text here. So that will work for you. But what I like doing is I like, instead of doing that, I will use both, but my preference generally is that I like to do what is called camel casing. So I eliminate the underscores like so. And in the middle of your file name, you are allowed to use capital letters. But notice that there's no space between them. And usually by doing it this way, there's enough of a distinction between the words that it's fairly easy to read. But if it was my first image and second or something like that, so another rule that you should pay attention to is that do not ever use any special characters like an ampersand. Okay, so it doesn't matter where in your file name you put it, but don't use special characters. Other things like $signs, other things like exclamation points and stuff, don't do that because those oftentimes have a different meaning in code. So typically the way you will name the files for your images as well as your HTML files will be using the camel casing like I've done, or if you want to put space between words, then use an underscore. You can always add a numeral at the end. So if I put this as version 1, I can do that. Or if I need an underscore between it, I can do that. I also recommend that you don't start your file name with a numeral either. It depends on the type of server, but they don't like capital letters at the beginning, and oftentimes they don't like numerals at the beginning. So I hope this isn't too confusing, but it's important to take note of this, and you might want to take notes, or when I post this, to go back and watch the first few minutes and make notes for yourself so that when you're naming files, you follow the protocol. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of these files. I don't want to save them. And I'm going to show you how to, if you're going to get images off your phone or your camera or the internet, I'm going to start by opening a file from the internet first and saving it, and then showing you how you would go back in and resize it and save it 3 different ways, one for a JPEG, and the second way for a GIF, and the third way for a PNG, and when you would need to use each of those file types. So what I want to do now is I'm going to switch to, I'm going to do a Google search here. Okay. And how about, I'm going to look up the topic roses. I want to put an image of a rose on my website. So I'm looking for generic roses, and I go to images here. Okay. Find the images that I need. Typically, you can use really small files, but I like starting with a fairly large one. So if you're not sure about the sizes that you need, you really have to prepare in advance and decide about, they're generally measured in pixels, about the size that you'll need. For our assignment, you're going to create an end file size of 400 by 400 pixels. So let's go to Tools up here. And under size, we can look at large, medium, and we don't need icon size, but let's just look at large and see what shows up. Okay, and you can see that most of them are fairly large files that are available to us. So I'm going to go ahead and pick one of these. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pick what one? I don't know. I'm going to pick this one right here. Okay, so I'll select it. And when I do, it pops up here. And now what I want to do is I want to download it. So if you're unfamiliar with downloading images to your computer, once it pops up here, and I am using, let's see, I am using Safari right now, but if you use Firefox or any of the others, you'll find a similar message here. And I'm going to go ahead and right click on it. Okay. And then what it will do, it will allow me to download the linked file. What I want to do is save the image as, and I'm going to save it on my desktop. And you can see right here the size, it is pretty large. It's over 2,880 pixels by 2,160. That's right here. Now, this would be a good size if you wanted your splash screen to have a big image like this. You would need an image this size, but you wouldn't need one any larger than that. And that's it. But what we're doing for our class, this would be an image that would be inserted into your page, and it would be relatively small. So I'm going to go ahead and save the image as, and I don't know what file type it is. Okay, so it's going to take a second here, and I'm going to go to my desktop. And I have a folder already set up for all of us. So this is Art 196, Fall 2021. I'll save it in here. And I'm just going to export it as rows. And I don't know what file type it is, but I assume it's a JPEG, but we will find out in a minute. So I'll save it. And now I can move this out of the way. And I can go ahead and I can open it up. So I'm going to go back to File, Open. And I'm going to go back to that file source that I just saved on my desktop. And my computer is already starting to slow down a little bit. So I'm going to go to the desktop. And I'm going to go to Content for Art 196. And here's the rows. Now it shows under kind, it is a JPEG image. So when I open it up, it will be quite large, and we're going to scale it down a bit. But before I do, this is what I recommend that you do for this image. And it's a beautiful image, sharp, crisp, good contrast, bright colors and everything. So it'd be a good one to use. But the first thing that I would do is before I optimize an image, I like saving the original image as a Photoshop file, because then I can go back in and I can edit it and resize it and add text and recolor it and do whatever I want to it, add adjustment layers, to dress it up a bit. And then I can go back and I can optimize it again. So this is what I'm going to do. Let me get this out of the way again. This keeps coming down here. I don't know why it does that. So anyway, I'm going to come back here and I'm going to save this now. Instead of a JPEG, I'm going to work with it as a Photoshop file. So I'm going to first go ahead and I'm going to save as. And we're going to go ahead and say, I'm just going to save it on my computer. And it pops up, and here is the rows. I'm going to leave the other one intact, and I'm not going to save it as a JPEG. I'm going to save it as a Photoshop file so that it has the extension .psd. That's clearly not the file that I upload to the web. So now I'm prepared to resize this, colorize it, do whatever I want with it. So let's try something kind of weird. I'm going to hit Command-I just to invert it. So maybe I want something really unusual on my website. And what I need to do is I'm going to save it in 3 different file types for you. We have the background image. And by default, my practice is usually I make a copy of it in case I mess up. Okay, so I have a copy of the background, and so this will be my background image. But notice that it's the name of the layer is at a capital. It starts with a capital. So I'm going to double click in here, and I'm going to name it background .jpg for JPEG. Okay. Now, this will be the tricky part in a minute. I'm going to resize this first. So let's go ahead and crop. So I'm going to use the crop tool over here. And I want this, I'm going to go to width, height, and resolution. And I'm going to change this to pixels. So I'm going to name it, because I want it 400 pixels by 400. I want it 400 px, and then I want it 400 px, 400 px. Okay, so now I'm cropping it, and I need to move this around a little bit to get what I'm looking for. And if I need to, I can reduce this a little bit in size, just to make sure that I don't get any of the background in there. And that will work just fine for me. So I'll go ahead and I'll crop it. Notice what I did here. And this is relatively new to Photoshop. It says delete crop pixels. I do not want to do that. So I'm going to undo that. And I'm going to come back and I'm going to turn that off. And I'm going to go back to crop again. And that's where I want it. So now I'll go ahead and I'll crop it. Now in the future, if I need to bring back any of those pixels, I can do that. So for those of you unfamiliar with Photoshop and its properties, that's an important one. And notice that it really reduced it in size considerably. Okay, from that 2000 pixels. So now what I want to do is maybe one of the things that I would like to do, instead of a rectangular format, what I'd like to do is I'd like to use this in a circle, have a different shaped image. JPEG images can only be viewed as rectangles. So what I might want to do is copy this layer. So we'll go ahead and I'm going to make a copy of it. And this is one that I'm going to use for my GIF, because as I said, JPEGs can only be rectangular, but GIF files and PNG files, you can add transparency. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to name this one background with, or I'm going to name it round background. We'll do that. Or round rows. That's what I'll name it. .gif. Okay. So I'm going to turn off this one, the one that's beneath it, leave this layer turned on. And now I need to make a clipping mask for this. So I'll start with one of my, I don't want a lasso. I want, let's see. I want, where is it? It's up here. There we go. I want an elliptical marquee. So I'm going to hold down the Option and the Shift key and click and drag. And you can see the little marching ants. And I'm going to make this even a little bit bigger so that, no, maybe I'll just leave it there. Okay. And let's go ahead and actually I'm going to change the size of it. So I changed my mind. I'm going to move over the center of this and try to make this as big as possible. So instead of a square image, I have a circular image. Remember I said we can do that with PNGs and we can do that with GIFs, but we cannot do that with JPEGs. So now what I'll do is I'm going to click this little button right here next to the FX button. And that clips off all the outside. Okay. So that's the second thing that we can do with that. So this is typically when you would use a GIF, that if you want transparency. And that means that the outside corners are transparent now. And we have that as our image. In addition to that, what I can do is that what if I want partial opacity? With GIF files, you can only have 100% opacity or 0%, and that's it. So either it's transparent or opaque. So what I'll do is I'll make a copy of this, or actually I'm going to make a copy of the one that the JPEG that I had before. And this is going to be our PNG file. You can do it either way. I'll turn that one on, turn this one off. But now what I'll do is I'm going to change the opacity of this layer and make it 50% so I can actually see through the image. Okay, so you see the little checkerboard behind it. So I'm going to rename this one and I'll call it transparent background or trans background. .png. So for partial opacity, that would be when you would use a PNG. A PNG can be used for all of the above or for all of these. They can be used for 100% opacity. They can be used for Photoshop, for regular images or graphic images, or you name it. It's the more universal version. The problem with it is that sometimes the file sizes are a little bit larger than the JPEGs. So if you're unsure, you can always use a PNG file. For most photographs, if they're rectangular, you can use JPEGs. And if you want transparency that's total transparent, then you would use a GIF file. Okay. Now, notice that I've named all of these in my layers here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit Command S to save my file. And I'm going to turn all of the layers on again. And now what I want to do is I'm going to go to File And what I can do is I can generate image assets. So if you need multiple types for your files, this is probably the best way to do that. And also, the question that I have here in my chat is that, can you use any image for this first assignment? And the answer is yes. If you want to take your own image with your smartphone, that would be a good way to do it. And if you want to use an image off the internet, you can do that as well. So back to this, I'm going to go ahead and select image assets. Now, by doing that, I can go ahead here, and if I look at the folder that I created for us, I don't want to do that. Let me go ahead and hide this for a minute. And you can see my desktop is not terribly organized. It's just the way I work here. Want to do that. So I'll open the file up. Hopefully all of you can see this. Open the folder, I should say. And we can see, it's really kind of small here, but you can see here's my Rose PSD. That's my original. And then you can see that there's a folder in here named Rose Assets. And here is, let's look at this. Let's see. I'm going to look at this in columns. So when I select in Rose Assets, when I select the background, you can see that the background is rectangular. It gives us the file size and tells us when it was created and everything. If I select the round rows, you can see that it's saved already as a GIF. And then if I click the ping file, you can see that it's a little bit lighter than the original, but you have to trust me that this is partially transparent. So that's an effective way of saving multiple types of files within Photoshop. Now, there is an old school way of doing this that is equally as good, but you're going to have to turn your images on and off to do that. So here is my ping file. And I'm going to turn off the others so I can see what I'm doing. So an old way of saving this is to go to File, and I want to export. And then what I want to do is say Save for Web Legacy. This is an old way of doing it, but I still find it very effective. In the upper, what I would prefer to do is have the 4 up here, so that I can compare and contrast. The one and to the left is my original. That's what it looks like. And then I want to see if there's a degradation in quality. There's the JPEG, and this is maximum quality. If I click here, this one is medium quality. And then this one here is low quality. Now, if I can't tell the difference, what this does for me is it shows that as a high quality with an old 56K modem, it will take 20 seconds to download. So what you will find in web design is that you want to get the best quality of your image, but at the same time, you want to reduce the file size and make it as small as possible, so that it won't clutter up the memory that it will take to download your files. So if I can't discern a difference, maybe the lowest quality would be best. And you can see that it only takes, you go from 20 seconds to 3 seconds. Now, for people who do not have connections to the internet that are fast, and maybe they still use an old modem, then you might, and if they're part of your audience, then that's what you might have to do. For people who have T1 connections, or you have a T1 line, if you have, as I do, it's still slows down sometimes, but you have, what is it that I have tongue-tied at the moment? Cable modem, then, then you have fast connections and you needn't really worry that much about the speed. But, this is what it would take for the 3 different kinds of JPEGs. Well, let's see what it looks like if I use, instead of a JPEG for that one, if I use a GIF or GIF. And then with this one, let's compare it and let's use it as a ping. And I'm going to use the ping 24. Well, you can see with the ping 24, it takes 57 seconds to download. It takes 20 seconds for the GIF, which is no different than the JPEG that I used at high quality. And the GIF is a lower quality. So that might be an option, but JPEG may not be an option for me because remember, I wanted transparency and you can't have transparency with a JPEG. So do I use GIF or do I use ping? Now this is ping 24, but if I switch to ping 8-bit, then let's compare. Okay, so this would be, and I want to make sure that I have transparency. So this one is 18 seconds and this one is 20. A 2-second difference really doesn't matter. So either the GIF or the ping would work for the transparency. But remember, since this is partial transparency that I'm doing here, neither one of these will work. So I have to do the ping 24-bit. Notice that the transparency was going away. So in fact, it will take 57 seconds on an old 56K modem. If I want to see what it looks like on a faster modem, then I can come down here here's a T1 line with cable TV, and you can see it really doesn't matter. It's 3 seconds. So that's why this legacy mode has gone away. Before, you had to know who your target audience was, which you still do. But since most people have fast internet connections, the download time has now become a non-issue. But this is a nice way of making comparisons. So I'm going to cancel this. And let's also, let's turn this one off and this one on. And let's do the same thing. I'm going to select this layer. And I'm going to go to File. And I'm going to go back to Export. And it's going to go to Save for Web Legacy. So again, JPEG will not work because remember, it can only be rectangular. I no longer have that transparency. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to try the GIF. That works. And let's compare again with the ping 8-bit, which is all we would need. So either one of these would work. Both of them are 1 second. I would probably pick the ping since that's a more recent file type. But either one, GIF or ping would work. And you would see that I would have a circular image that I have for my web. So JPEG won't work for this type of opacity, but either the GIF or the ping will work. So I'm going to cancel. And I can get the nice comparisons and the time that it takes to download. So I'm going to turn on the JPEG background. And let's try this one now. If I save this one individually. So I'm going to go to File. And again, Export, Save for Web Legacy. And this time, because it's a rectangular image, the JPEG works. Maximum, okay, quality. With a 56K modem, or actually, no, I changed that, didn't I? Well, let's go back to the 56K modem. There we go. So it does take 28 seconds with an old modem. JPEG low quality, 4 seconds. And if you can't really see a difference, then use the low quality and that will be fine. JPEGs, by the way, are lossy file format, which means in order to compress these files, they have to throw away pixels. And that's how you get the smaller file size. So a high quality JPEG, they throw out, there's less compression, they throw out fewer pixels. Medium, more pixels. And low quality, but small file size, they throw out a lot of pixels. That's why there's a general rule that you never JPEG a JPEG, because if you do that enough times, there will be a significant degradation in quality of image. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and cancel this. And we're back to my image here. So what I want you to do for your project is to, as I said, I would prefer that, well, you can use whatever imaging editing program you want. I think Photoshop is usually the default. But if you have something else, be my guest. Is it because there are free image editing programs available on Google. So if you want to use that, you can. But I want you to end up with an image that is 4 inches by 4 inches, or rather 400 pixels by 400 pixels. My mistake. Okay, so that you are forced to crop an image. Then I want you to present it in the 3 different formats that I've shown this morning: a JPEG, GIF, and PNG. I want the JPEG to be a rectangle, to be solid. I want the GIF to have some transparency. It doesn't have to be a circle, but if you want to duplicate exactly what I've done, you're more than welcome to do so. And then I also want you to show a PNG file. And the PNG file should have partial opacity or partial transparency, however you want to name it. Okay. Are there any questions? I'm going to go ahead, and if there are, I may just go ahead and pause. So hold on here. Sebastian, you have a question? Go ahead and unmute or put it in the. You can, for the legacy, you can only do one at a time. Yeah, the question is, can you do this with multiple images? You can only do one at a time. But that's why they changed that in more recent iterations, because most people have a faster internet connection. And that if you name your files correctly in layers, and you turn them all on at the same time, you can go to generate image assets and boom, in one fell swoop, then you could do multiple images at the same time if you use that system, but not with the legacy. You can only do one at a time. So they're trying to be more efficient, and by doing it this way, it does work pretty well. But you have to, you have to prepare and pretty much know what outcome you want. So I could go ahead on a separate layer here. Let me go ahead and import another image with this file. So just to show you, and this will be the last thing that I do today. So I'm going to go ahead and open another image. Let's see if I can find something on my desktop here. So, okay, here's an image that I have of Morro Bay that's behind me. So I'm going to go ahead and open that. There we go. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to bring this file into my other one. I'm going to go ahead here and I'm going to drag it in here and I'm going to center it, and it's going to be way huge. So if I turn this one off, we can see that it is just way, way, way too big. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit, hover over this, and with this layer, I'm going to hit Command T to transform. And then I'm going to hold down the Shift and the Option key. And I'm going to shrink it down to fit that size. Okay, and I'm going to hit return. Now I'm going to zoom in. So maybe I want this image to be as well. So I'll rename this one. So using this system, so I can call it Morro Bay.jpg. And I'm going to save the file. And then I'm also going to go to image assets and let's see if it's updated it. Because as soon as you change any of those, you can see that it already, by doing that this way, using layers, it already updated my image assets. So it's a very efficient way, if you are using the same size image, of saving them for the web. You just have to remember that the image that you're using is 72 pixels per inch. Depending on the size, it's measured in pixels, okay? And it's important to use the naming system that I did. Never start with a capital letter. Don't use spaces between words. Don't use special characters. If you do want spaces between words, then you need to use an underscore to accommodate that, or you can use the camel casing like what I've done. And then you're set to go. Change it to 72 pixels per inch, because 72 pixels per inch is screen resolution. That is all web images need to be. 72 pixels per inch. On the PC, it is 96 pixels per inch, but 72 is sort of a standard for web design. Any more is just unnecessary, and it will bloat your web page, and you're not going to see any different. Now, if we were working for print, 72 won't work for you. It has to be a minimum of 200 pixels per inch, and usually it's 300 pixels per inch minimum when you're designing an image for print. So that's probably one of the advantages of working in web design, is that you only need to work with small images. You don't need big bloated images that are hundreds of megabytes or even a gigabit of memory. Okay, so that's how that would work. So you can see that it already updated that, and you can do, using this system, you can do multiple images, but not with the legacy, one at a time. Okay, so does everybody know what they have to do? And I presume everyone who is here has access to Google Drive, so that you will put this assignment, the 3 different images, in your folder, and I will have them graded for you. It's due by next week. Next week, we're going to start the lessons with we're going to work with HTML, give you a background with that, and then we're going to start talking about CSS. So there won't be any lessons to turn in from the textbook just yet. Not until we get to, maybe, as I said, you will publish lesson 7. So I'll assume that you're doing all of the lessons, and then when you publish lesson 7, if it works and I can see it properly, you get the full 20-point credit. It's kind of an all or nothing thing. Okay. So are we good for today? Any other questions? No? Yeah, when you submit it, you upload the 3 images to your folder inside Google Drive. So for example, if I pull this down here, here's our Google Drive, and here is our shared folder. And these are all the people that, all of you in the class that have been in touch with me. So for example, let's see, Sebastian, are you on here? Sebastian Juarez. Yeah, you're right here. So if I double click on here and you have access to it, you should be able to put your file in here. I'm going to go ahead. You can put them there, or while I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a new folder for you here. So I'll put it in assignments. So you can put it in this folder, assignment folder within your folder. Okay. So there you have it. We don't cover this until lesson 10 in the textbook, but I think it's important to know these things now as you're learning web design, just as we're going to be starting off with HTML and CSS to give you kind of a background in the basics in web design. Okay, so that's it. I'm going to go ahead and if there aren't any more questions, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pause the recording and say goodbye, and you guys are free to leave. And I'll stop my I'll end the webinar now.